The diplomatic mission commander Zethvar of the Galactic Council adjusted his ceremonial robes as his sleek transport vessel approached the small blue planet humans called Earth. The elongated alien's silver eyes held nothing but disdain as he reviewed the mission briefings on his holographic display. Humanity had recently discovered faster-than-light travel and had begun making contact with other species across the galaxy. The Council had decided it was time for a formal evaluation. Barbaric creatures, Zethvar muttered to his aide, a smaller reptilian being named Crix. Look at their history. Constant warfare, environmental destruction, and they still consume other living beings for sustenance. How such primitive minds manage to crack the FTL barrier is beyond my comprehension. Crix nodded nervously. The commander was known throughout the Council for his strict adherence to what he considered proper civilization. His own species, the Veltar, had evolved past physical conflict over 3,000 years ago. They sustained themselves on synthesized nutrients and had achieved perfect social harmony through advanced neural networking. To Zethvar, any species that still engaged in individual competition and physical violence was barely above the level of wild animals. The transport touched down at what humans called the United Nations headquarters in New York City. Zethvar emerged from his vessel expecting to see crude concrete structures and primitive technology. Instead, he found himself surrounded by towering glass buildings that reflected the afternoon sun in brilliant patterns. Humans in neat clothing moved efficiently along clean walkways, and the air was surprisingly fresh for a planet he had assumed would be choked with industrial pollution. "Welcome to Earth, Commander Zethvar," said a tall human woman in a crisp blue uniform. "I am Secretary General Maria Santos. We are honored by your visit." Zethvar studied her with his analytical gaze. The human stood straight and confident, showing no signs of the submissive posture he expected from a lesser species. Her eyes met his directly, which among his people would be considered either brave or foolish. "I am here to conduct the standard evaluation for potential council membership," he replied in his precise, translated speech. "I trust you understand the gravity of this process." "Of course," Santos replied smoothly. "We have prepared comprehensive presentations about our civilization, technology, and peaceful intentions." The word peaceful almost made Zethvar laugh out loud. He had studied human history extensively during the long journey to Earth. These creatures had spent their entire existence finding new and creative ways to destroy each other. They had developed weapons capable of ending all life on their planet. And according to his intelligence reports, many of those weapons still existed. How could such a species even use the word peaceful with any sincerity? Over the next several hours, Zethvar sat through presentation after presentation. Humans showed him their art, which he found chaotic and emotional. They demonstrated their music, which seemed to serve no practical purpose beyond stirring up feelings. They explained their various forms of government, most of which involved some form of competition between different groups fighting for control. Everything he saw confirmed his initial assessment. These were not civilized beings, but clever animals who had accidentally stumbled onto advanced technology. "Your species shows some technical aptitude," Zethvar finally said during a break in the presentations. "But I see no evidence of the social evolution necessary for council membership. You still maintain separate nations that compete with one another. You have individuals who accumulate vastly more resources than others. Most concerning, you continue to maintain military forces. True civilization has no need for instruments of war." Secretary General Santos exchanged a glance with her advisors. "Commander, perhaps you would benefit from seeing our military not as a sign of barbarism, but as an example of human capability and organization. Would you accept an invitation to observe one of our joint training exercises tomorrow?" Zethvar was intrigued despite himself. In his experience, primitive species usually tried to hide their military capabilities from council evaluators, not showcase them. Very well. I will observe this demonstration. Perhaps it will provide additional insight into human nature. That evening, as Zethvar reviewed his notes in his temporary quarters, he found himself puzzled by several observations. The humans had shown remarkable technological advancement in a very short time. Their cities were cleaner than he had expected, and their leaders seemed more organized than his pre-mission intelligence had suggested. Most surprising of all, despite having the capacity for global destruction, they had somehow avoided wiping themselves out. Still, he reminded himself, none of this changed the fundamental nature of their species. They were still violent, competitive, and individualistic. Tomorrow's military demonstration would likely confirm everything he believed about their primitive character. He would recommend against council membership and return home knowing he had protected the galaxy from another dangerous species. As he settled into his rest cycle, Zethvar had no idea that his entire understanding of humanity was about to be challenged in ways he could never imagine. The demonstration planned for tomorrow was not just a simple training exercise. It was a full-scale simulation of the kind of coordinated defense operation that only a truly unified species could accomplish. The humans had chosen their demonstration very carefully. They knew that most galactic species viewed military capability as a sign of primitive development. But they also knew that in a universe full of unknown dangers, the ability to defend one's civilization was not a mark of barbarism, but of wisdom and strength. Tomorrow, Commander Zethvar would see exactly what human military organization could accomplish when every individual chose to work toward a common goal. The stage was set for a revelation that would challenge everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about the nature of true civilization. Outside Zethvar's window, the lights of New York City twinkled like stars, each one representing millions of humans going about their daily lives, unaware that their entire future in the galaxy hung on the opinion of one alien observer who had already made up his mind about their worth. The demonstration. The morning sun cast long shadows across the vast training ground as Commander Zethvar arrived at what humans called the International Defense Coordination Center. The facility stretched for kilometers in every direction, filled with equipment, vehicles, and personnel from dozens of different human nations. Secretary General Santos met him at the observation platform, a raised structure that provided a clear view of the entire complex. "What you will see today," Santos explained, "is Exercise Unity Shield. It simulates a coordinated response to a large-scale threat requiring immediate global cooperation. Every major nation on Earth is participating." Zethvar observed the scene below with growing confusion. Instead of the chaotic disorder he expected from a primitive military display, he saw thousands of humans moving with precise coordination. Vehicles from different nations worked together seamlessly, their operators communicating in multiple languages through translation devices. Soldiers who had been enemies in past conflicts now worked side by side as if they had trained together for years. "This is impossible," Zethvar said, more to himself than to his hosts. "How do you coordinate forces from competing nations? Where is the power struggle, the territorial disputes?" "Watch," Santos replied simply. A simulation alarm began to sound across the facility. Instantly, the entire complex transformed into a hive of focused activity. Communications operators established contact with command centers on every continent. Satellite networks activated to provide real-time intelligence sharing between all participating forces. Most remarkably, military units began reorganizing themselves not by nation of origin, but by capability and strategic necessity. Zethvar watched in amazement as a Japanese logistics specialist took command of a supply convoy that included vehicles from Brazil, Germany, and Nigeria. A Russian pilot received tactical support from American ground controllers. Indian engineers worked alongside Canadian technicians to establish a mobile command post. None of them seemed to care about their different uniforms, flags, or cultural backgrounds. They had become something greater than the sum of their individual parts. "How is this possible?" Zethvar demanded. "My intelligence reports indicate your species has been in constant conflict for thousands of years. These nations have fought wars against each other within recent memory, yet they work together as if they share a single mind." "That's where your intelligence was incomplete, Commander," Santos said. "Yes, we have a history of conflict, but we also have something perhaps unique in the galaxy: the ability to choose cooperation over competition when survival is at stake. When faced with a threat that could destroy all of us, our differences become irrelevant." The simulation continued to unfold with stunning precision. Air forces from a dozen nations coordinated flight patterns that would have been impossible without perfect trust and communication. Naval vessels from traditionally hostile powers shared radar data and defensive positions. Ground forces adapted their tactics in real time based on intelligence provided by former enemies. But what struck Zethvar most profoundly was not the technical coordination, but the human behavior he observed. Individual soldiers repeatedly put themselves at risk to protect others from different nations. Commanders made tactical decisions that benefited the overall mission even when it put their own units at disadvantage. Resource allocation prioritized global effectiveness over national advantage. "Your species sacrifices individual benefit for group success," Zethvar observed, his voice filled with wonder. "I have never seen such behavior outside of hive-minded species." "We're not hive-minded," Santos corrected. "Every person down there is making an individual choice to be part of something larger. That's what makes us strong. Our unity isn't programmed or forced. It's chosen freely by millions of independent minds deciding to work toward the same goal." As the exercise reached its climax, Zethvar witnessed something that shook him to his core. A simulated casualty scenario required immediate evacuation of wounded personnel from a dangerous zone. Without hesitation, medical teams from 7 different nations rushed toward the simulated danger area. They didn't check the nationality of the wounded. They didn't prioritize their own citizens. They simply saved every life they could reach, treating each injured person with equal care and dedication. "This cannot be typical behavior," Zethvar protested. "This must be an exceptional demonstration prepared specifically for my visit." "Actually," said a new voice behind them, "this is just Tuesday." Zethvar turned to see a weathered human male in military uniform. Santos performed introductions. "Commander Zethvar, this is General Harrison, head of the Global Defense Initiative. General, the commander finds it difficult to believe that this level of cooperation is normal for our species." General Harrison chuckled. "Normal? Commander, what you're seeing today is actually a smaller-scale version of exercises we run monthly. The only thing special about today is that we have an audience." He gestured toward the active battlefield below. 6 months ago, we had a real emergency when an asteroid threatened to impact near major population centers. The response you're witnessing here? We pulled it off in real life in less than 18 hours with zero advance preparation." "Impossible," Zethvar whispered. "We have the recordings if you'd like to see them," Harrison offered. 43 nations contributed resources. 12 different space agencies coordinated the deflection mission. Emergency services from around the world prepared evacuation plans for areas that might be affected. And when it was over, not a single government demanded special recognition or compensation. They just went back to their normal duties. The simulation exercise concluded with a debriefing session where representatives from every participating nation reviewed their performance. Zethvar watched as they openly discussed mistakes, shared lessons learned, and planned improvements for future coordination. There were no accusations, no blame shifting, no attempts to claim superior performance. Each group focused solely on how they could contribute more effectively to the collective effort. "Commander," Santos said as they walked back toward his transport. "I understand this challenges your preconceptions about our species, but this is who we are. Yes, we compete. Yes, we sometimes conflict. But when it matters most, when survival itself is at stake, we choose unity. We choose to be better than our individual limitations." That evening, Zethvar sat in his quarters reviewing everything he had witnessed. His entire evaluation framework had been based on the assumption that primitive species could not achieve true cooperation without surrendering individuality. Yet humans had demonstrated precisely the opposite. They had achieved unprecedented cooperation while maintaining their individual identities and decision-making capabilities. For the first time in his long career as a council evaluator, Commander Zethvar found himself questioning not just his assessment of a single species, but the fundamental assumptions underlying galactic civilization itself. Perhaps the Council's definition of advancement was incomplete. Perhaps there were forms of strength that could only emerge from chosen unity rather than programmed conformity. Tomorrow would bring the final phase of his evaluation, but already Zethvar suspected that his report would contain recommendations that would shock the entire Galactic Council. These humans were not primitive savages stumbling toward technology. They were something far more remarkable, a species that had learned to transcend their individual limitations without sacrificing their individual nature. The question now was whether the galaxy was ready for that kind of revolutionary thinking. The Revelation Commander Zethvar spent his final day on Earth in deep contemplation. Secretary General Santos had offered him tours of human cultural sites, scientific installations, or entertainment centers, but he had politely declined them all. Instead, he requested something unusual: permission to walk alone through a typical human city and observe normal daily life. Santos had arranged for him to spend the day in Geneva, accompanied only by a discreet translation device and an emergency communicator. As Zethvar walked through the ancient streets, he tried to reconcile what he saw with everything he thought he knew about primitive civilizations. Children from dozens of different ethnic backgrounds played together in parks, their games requiring cooperation and rule-following that would impress even advanced galactic species. Business people from competing companies shared transportation and engaged in friendly conversation. Most remarkably, when Zethvar witnessed a minor traffic accident, he watched strangers immediately stop to help, regardless of their own schedules or obligations. At a local hospital, he observed human medical professionals treating patients based solely on need and severity of condition. Wealthy and poor, young and old, citizen and foreigner, all received the same standard of care. When he inquired about payment systems, he learned that many human societies had developed complex networks ensuring that medical treatment was available regardless of individual economic resources. "How do you sustain such systems?" Zethvar asked a human doctor during an impromptu conversation. "Where is the competitive advantage that drives innovation and efficiency?" The doctor, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Chen, smiled at the question. "Competition and cooperation aren't opposites, Commander. We compete to develop better treatments, more efficient procedures, faster diagnostic tools. But when a patient needs help, competition becomes irrelevant. The only thing that matters is using our best knowledge and skills to preserve life." "But surely your medical institutions compete for resources and recognition." "Of course they do, but they also share research data, collaborate on complex cases, and train each other's personnel. Last month, our cardiology team spent 2 weeks training doctors from a hospital we supposedly compete with. Why? Because better-trained doctors save more lives, regardless of which institution employs them. That afternoon, Zethvar visited what humans called a university. He expected to find rigid hierarchical structures where knowledge was hoarded by elite groups to maintain power advantages. Instead, he discovered institutions dedicated to creating and sharing knowledge as widely as possible. Students from around the world studied together. Professors from competing universities collaborated on research projects, and discoveries were published openly for anyone to access and build upon. Your species gives away your most valuable resource, Zethvar observed during a conversation with a physics professor. Knowledge should provide competitive advantage. Why do you share it freely? Professor Williams looked puzzled by the question. Knowledge isn't diminished by sharing, Commander. When I teach a student everything I know, I don't lose that knowledge. And if that student goes on to make new discoveries, all of humanity benefits. Competition in science isn't about hoarding information. It's about who can contribute most effectively to our collective understanding. As evening approached, Zethvar found himself in a small restaurant where he had arranged to meet Santos for their final discussion. The establishment was filled with humans from various backgrounds, ages, and social levels, all sharing food and conversation in an atmosphere of relaxed cooperation. Even this simple social scene challenged his assumptions about primitive behavior. "Commander," Santos said as she joined him at his table, "you seem troubled. I hope your observations today haven't been disappointing." Disappointing? Zethvar set down his synthesized nutrition supplement and looked directly at the human leader. "Secretary General, I came to your planet expecting to find clever animals who had accidentally achieved technology beyond their social development. Instead, I have discovered a species that may be more advanced than my own." Santos raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a change from your initial assessment." "Indeed. The Galactic Council operates on the assumption that true civilization requires the elimination of competition, conflict, and individual ambition. We believe that advanced species naturally evolve toward hive-like cooperation, where individual desires are subordinated to collective harmony. We have built our entire galactic society on these principles." Zethvar paused, struggling to articulate thoughts that challenged everything he had believed for centuries. "But your species has achieved something we thought impossible. You have maintained individual freedom, competition, and even conflict, while simultaneously demonstrating unprecedented levels of voluntary cooperation. You choose unity without sacrificing individuality. This should be impossible according to our models of civilizational development." "Perhaps your models are incomplete," Santos suggested gently. "More than incomplete. I fear they may be fundamentally wrong." Zethvar's silver eyes reflected the restaurant's warm lighting as he continued. "Your military demonstration showed me that humans can achieve perfect coordination without surrendering individual judgment. Your medical systems prove that competition can coexist with universal compassion. Your educational institutions demonstrate that knowledge sharing actually enhances rather than diminishes competitive advantage. And what does this mean for your report to the Galactic Council?" Zethvar was quiet for a long moment. "It means I must recommend not only that humanity be granted full council membership, but that the council itself must reconsider its fundamental assumptions about the nature of civilization. Your species may represent the next stage of galactic evolution." Santos smiled. "That's quite an honor, Commander. But I should warn you that recommending humanity for council membership may not be as simple as you think. We have one more thing to show you before you leave. What could possibly be more significant than what I have already witnessed? The reason why our military cooperation is so effective, why our institutions share knowledge so freely, why strangers help each other without expecting rewards." Santos activated a holographic display that showed Earth from orbit. "Commander, everything you have seen represents humanity's response to a simple truth. We know we are not alone in the universe, and we know that survival requires us to be worthy of our place among the stars." The display zoomed in to show humans working on massive space construction projects, colonies on the Moon and Mars, and deep space exploration vessels already pushing toward nearby star systems. Every day, our species prepares for the moment when we will take our place in a larger galactic community. Every act of cooperation, every shared discovery, Every moment of chosen unity makes us stronger and more capable of contributing to that community. You have been preparing for galactic citizenship without any guarantee that it would be offered, Zethvar realized. We have been preparing because it is the right thing to do. Whether the Galactic Council accepts us or not, we will continue to grow, to explore, to learn, and to become the best version of ourselves possible. That is what humans do. We do not achieve greatness to impress others. We achieve greatness because we refuse to accept anything less from ourselves. As Zethvar returned to his transport vessel the following morning, he carried with him a preliminary report that would transform galactic politics forever. His recommendations went far beyond simple council membership for humanity. He suggested that the council establish a new category of civilization, one that recognized the unique strength that emerged from chosen cooperation rather than programmed unity. More importantly, his report contained a warning. Any galactic civilization that could not adapt to this new model of development would eventually be surpassed by species that could. Humanity represented not just another member species, but a fundamental shift in how intelligence and civilization itself might evolve. As his ship departed Earth's atmosphere, Zethvar looked back at the blue planet with something approaching reverence. He had come expecting to catalog another primitive species. Instead, he had discovered teachers who would challenge the galaxy to become something greater than anyone had previously imagined possible. The real question now was whether the Galactic Council would have the wisdom to learn from these remarkable beings, or whether humanity would have to show them the way forward whether they wanted to follow or not. Either way, Zethvar suspected that the galaxy would never be the same again.